Wow, Chris was so disappointed by this show that he ultimately stepped away, but I'm joined once again by Matt from Basic Entertainment in order to recap the finale of the Book of Boba Fett entitled In the Name of Honor. Okay, like, look, Matt, let's just get this stupid thing over with.
It's just roll it.
Oh man, I feel so bad for Chris putting all that work into that intro graphic, and it's all for this, all for this show that we just wrapped up. It's so funny because I saw that title this morning, In the Name of Honor, and I'm like, what did Prince Zuko write the title of this episode? Like, what's going on here? But
Right.
We're here, we're back, it's finally over with. These last 7 weeks, as if, look, Matt, we as if we didn't learn our lesson last year when we were recapping WandaVision and Falcon and Winter Soldier back to back, because those shows were only 2 weeks apart from each other, and after that we were like, no more. We're done. But This was Star Wars. It was different. We loved recapping Mandalorian season 2 week to week back in, Christmas of 2020. And we're like, okay, it's Star Wars, right? What could possibly go wrong with it? What could possibly be bad with it? Turns out everything, because
everything went wrong with this one.
Even in the Disney Plus era, they can still fuck up with Star Wars. I don't know, man. Before we get into this, I'm assuming you were looking forward to the show once they announced that all the way back in 2020, right?
No, I wasn't.
Really?
I'll be honest with you.
Really? Okay, go more into that.
I wasn't. No, because I feel like, with this character Boba Fett, I wasn't intrigued with it. And I think Stuckman brought up a great point that everything that Mandalorian was doing was pretty much what everyone wanted to see Boba Fett doing. But once Mandalorian came out, Boba Fett got to push something into something else. And what he got to push into was not very interesting, to say the least. Very confusing at some points.
Yeah, I'm not going to go out on a limb and say that the story was all bad, because like I've said about the last couple of Disney Plus, because this is Disney Plus show, I'm trying to think now. This has got to be 7 or 8 that we've watched right now after the first 2 seasons of Mandalorian, all the Disney Plus shows that Marvel shows that we watched last year. The thing I'll say is that every other Disney Plus show, it's all great in hindsight once you actually see all the pieces and how they work together, but it's the watching them week to week that it's just become a friggin' chore after a while. It becomes so tedious, it becomes so tiresome, it becomes so boring, because it becomes beyond clear that they save all their chips for the final episode, And if anything, that's what made Mandalorian season 2 so awesome and so refreshing, is the fact that every episode there was something happening. There was something propelling the story forward. There was some awesome action set piece. There was some new bit of information that was revealed. And what I'll say about Boba is, in hindsight, after having watched all the episodes now, after they've concluded, I will definitely say that kind of the introspective character drama that it was trying to get across, at least for the first 4 episodes, was actually kind of intriguing. And I've said this before, Boba's time with the Tuskens and kind of learning from them and how they kind of brought him back and kind of gave him this new lease on life. It's something that even today, as I've been reconsidering it since I finished watching the episode, I'm like, you know what? That wasn't actually that bad. That was actually kind of interesting, kind of seeing I'm trying to think of the accurate, the movie comparison, but essentially the person that goes into the desert in order to try and find something that they've lost, and they come back and change, man. That was really interesting. But it's the presentation of it and the fact that, okay, that seems to be the sole interest of the show, to the point, but then we come back to this modern day storyline, which I find it really funny, because Chris was all about the modern day storyline with the Daimyo stuff and him ruling over Mos Espa and all these different characters he's running into. And honestly, as the weeks went on with that storyline, I'm like, are we sure this is the good storyline? Are we sure this is the mainstream storyline? Because this is not that good.
It got exposed early on with this show in episode 3. I was like, yeah, there's really nothing much here with those speed bikers and stuff. A lot of the stuff, a lot of the great juiciest parts in this piece of Boba Fett comes from those flashbacks. But the presentation of it is very confusing. It's very where do I put my eye on? And I'll be honest with you, man. I think this is just a filler show. I just think this show is just, it feels like it just, they wrote 4 episodes. Maybe Mandalorian season 3 was supposed to come out sooner, so they had to fill in time for people to watch, Disney's Star Wars content. And they just made this, because half of the show, or majority of the great parts of the show, the awesome, amazing parts, doesn't have the title character in it.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, pretty much. It's kind of hilarious, you know, as far as it's like, wow, the best part about this is the Mandalorian. You know, obviously they delayed this in order to they delayed Mandalorian season 3 so that they could do this show, Book of Boba Fett. And obviously, it's been talked about the fact that Robert Rodriguez was a guy who filled in for the episode 6 in season 2. It was supposed to be somebody else. I don't remember who it was originally supposed to be. And then apparently the story is that they had so much fun working together, they ended up giving him another shot, which to me is code for, okay, they wanted to keep him around because he made a battle angel for Fox, and that eventually became like a Disney acquisition. So, you know,
Right.
like studio politics and all that. But I think that kind of going, but well, first things first, I wanted to go back to that word that you said before, that word filler. You know, it's so strange because that word has changed. So like so many other things that have changed in this age of the internet and streaming, I feel like that word has kind of lost its original meaning, where the original meaning of that word would come from the fact of, you know, back in the days of, I'll say, Chris's favorite show, Lost, that I love to take shots at, where you would have like these 24, 25 episode long seasons that would air from, it would basically air across the term of the traditional school year. They would start in like roughly September, October, and they would go they would take the break for Christmas, and they would run all the way through until usually April or May, sometimes even June of the following year. And obviously, again, when you're doing 24, 25 episodes a season, not every episode is going to be that super important. Not every episode is going to be like that crucial to the story, you know? Now, obviously, in the age of streaming, that word is kind of taken on a different form, but I feel like that word doesn't necessarily apply to individual episodes, but rather entire seasons. But even then, I feel like a more accurate term is a term that Chris brought up last week, which is this idea of baton passing. You know, the idea of like you're running an Olympic race and you're passing the torch to the next person. Only in this case, it doesn't necessarily have to be the next season of the show. You know, Mandalorian at the end of the day was not starting its own show that would eventually like spin off into other things. It was effectively jumpstarting the Star Wars cinematic universe that they had attempted to do back in 2015 with The Force Awakens and then failed, both because of their haphazard treatment towards the original trilogy and also the very lukewarm reception that the two Star Wars spin-off movies, Rogue One and Solo, both got. Even though, you know, Rogue One was a smashing box office success, the original reviews for that were still pretty middling. I still remember when it came out, and Solo, on top of, you know, being largely middling to really negative reviews for that movie, on top of the terrible release date that they picked for that, only a month after Infinity War opened up, like that movie was an absolute box office flop. So Disney Plus kind of gave them the opportunity that the movies kind of really screwed them out of. And now it's like, okay, so we know for a fact that, you know, Book of Boba Fett, we're getting Obi-Wan now at the end of May. You know, the release date was just announced for that. We're getting Bad Batch. Yeah, we're getting Bad Batch after that. We're getting Andor after that. And it's going to end with Mandalorian season 3, but it's like we know now, again, because this is what Marvel's trained us to do, to think towards our media, or rather our content now over the last 10 years, which is that, again, there's no one thing now that's continuous. It's just everything is part of this one cinematic universe. Everything is going to build into this like overarching big story. And again, it's the ultimate linch point, because at the end of the day, you could put out something like Boba that's kind of more middling and something that's kind of more tedious and kind of, you know, longer pace. And it really doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, people are still going to watch it, you know, because the brand recognition has truly surpassed the quality of content at this point.
Yeah. And I was going to say, I was surprised to know that Obi-Wan's coming out this year. And then we got Mandalorian coming out Christmas time. So season 3. So that's pretty amazing. But, you know, like the whole cinematic, I want to get your point on this. Like, do you feel like Star Wars moving into a cinematic universe connecting piece is the right thing for the you know, the brand? Or because I feel like it's more of, we're just going to play with certain time eras. I don't think anything from Obi-Wan's going to, it does sound weird now. Like we're talking about MCU stuff now. You know, it does sound weird, but
it leaks its way into every one of our conversations at this point. So I've kind of just learned to go with it.
Obi-Wan stuff is not gonna. I doubt it's gonna tie into stuff in the Mandalorian. But the Mandalorian,
you say that, but I promise you, dude. Again, because we're
like
riding again,
cameos and stuff.
Yeah. Where is Obi-Wan gonna take place?
It's gonna. Well, that one's taking place on
Tatooine.
Tatooine, yeah.
We can't escape this fucking planet. The sand.
I'm tired of it.
The sand keeps creeping up on us. It is coarse and rough and irritating.
It gets fucking everywhere. Yeah.
Everywhere. We cannot escape it. But to more seriously address your point there, it's really interesting, because this is actually something I also talked with Chris about last week, which is the sense of the idea of kind of the cinematic universe as we've come to understand it, as far as how Marvel's breached it within its storytelling format, and kind of how Star Wars both does and doesn't fit that mold. Because the strange thing about Star Wars, going all the way back to like its original days back in the 70s when it first became a thing in the public conscious, is that, and this was largely attributed to not really the movies, because the movies, again, it was just movies, you know, and the occasional dumb holiday special that everyone knew was bad, but they still watched it. But it's all the legends and like all the books that were written, all the video games that came out of it that kind of generated this like kind of larger, the Star Wars universe that we've come to know it. Because for the longest time, it really was just those original 3 movies. You know, they were 3 like the most watched, highest grossing, biggest like pop culture, game changing, you know, influencing, whatever other BuzzFeed words you want to throw at the movies of all time. But they were still just movies at the end of the day, you know? So, so this idea, this concept of a cinematic universe, right? There were other instances as time would go on, but there really wasn't this instance of it. And so the really unique thing about Star Wars is the fact that it did have such this rich history, this rich lore, and the fact that they actually put out another set of movies that explored a different time period that also still interlaced with the story. So, like, I feel like the best way that I can describe it, right, is the biggest difference between Marvel and Star Wars, but also how they kind of still fit the same mold. Marvel is always linear. It's always moving forward, right? The next movie that comes out within the sequence, it's always, even though there may be a prequel here and there, but for the most part, it's always serving to push the story forward. And they're not really interested in exploring, like, for lack of a better word, like the little moments, you know, because at the end of the day, there's no such thing as a little MCU thing. Like even the smallest, dumbest things, like What If or Hawkeye, you know, to name a few, even those are going to eventually tie in. You know, they're going to bring in new characters. They're going to bring in other settings that will eventually tie in with the story, you know? And that was the case for like the previous 10 years, you know? Iron Man built into Hulk, built into Thor, built into Captain America. And eventually we got all these other heroes. You're like, okay, how is Guardians of the Galaxy going to tie in? How's Ant-Man going to tie in? But we were kind of trained to know, okay, all this is going to eventually tie in once we eventually get to Endgame. And what's interesting about Star Wars is Star Wars, I think the biggest mistake that specifically The Rise of Skywalker made was them kind of marketing and positing that movie as like kind of the end game of the Star Wars universe, when Star Wars has never really been about that. Star Wars has always been more so about the journey rather than the destination. They're not building to this one big grandiose conclusion. You know, it's much more so about exploring these different pockets of the Star Wars history, most of which we're already familiar with, others of which we haven't seen before. Like, we still haven't seen anything pre-Phantom Menace yet. That's what Acolyte is going to cover, you know? But all the properties we've seen, you know, like we've gotten Solo and Rebels, which cover like and now we're going to get Obi-Wan, which cover the period in between the prequels and the original movies. You get, obviously, you now have Mandalorian and Book of Boba in order to cover that time period like immediately after. So, and the interesting thing that Star Wars does to me is that it's technically none of it is interconnected, but it's all interconnected, because even though you're watching something that has like will have this one set of characters that don't really interact with these other set of characters, you know, the Bad Batch are primarily on their own. They may have another Clone Wars character thrown in there, but they're kind of off on their own, you know, and you have all these other characters that kind of go in, but you still see like these overwhelming events that kind of affect everything. Like I said, Order 66, you know, the fall of the Empire, the destruction of the original Death Star, you know, Anakin leading the attack on the temple. You have these moments, these events that kind of overlay. And the interesting thing that I'll say that I think Disney Plus Star Wars is doing now, even at its worst, is I think it's doing a really good job of taking those like iconic, huge Star Wars events that we've become so familiar with over the course of the last 40 years and interspersing that, seeing like kind of, for lack of a better, how the regular people react to it. And that to me is like what the majesty of Star Wars is now. And that to me is how I think they're doing a really good job of differentiating themselves cinematic universe wise, whatever word you want to use, from Marvel, you know, is the fact that they don't really have a destination in mind, but the story, but it doesn't affect the trajectory of the story, if that makes any sense. I don't know. I felt like that was kind of a long-winded explanation, but did that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, no, it does. Yeah, so like stuff like the Mandalorian, right? Just like it almost feels like this is the true original sequels that people have been wanting to see.
Right.
You know, this is the time period right after Return that people are interested in. We see Luke and stuff, because I never felt like when they bring back Luke, when they bring back Leia, they did them justice. They never did. They just felt like old people just showing up for a check.
It's so unfortunate when the one thing that you can take away from those 3 movies was literally just to kill off our childhood. And I don't mean that facetiously or in like an obnoxious fanboy way, because it's like you literally look, it's like each one of those 3 movies specifically killed off one of the original 3 characters. And the reason why I say that too is because it's not like it really served a purpose narratively, you know?
No,
what did Han Solo's death mean at the end of the day? What did Luke Skywalker's death mean at the end of the day? Carrie Fisher's death, you know what? Leia's death on screen is even kind of more egregious, because they kind of only did that because they're like, ah, shit, you know, we don't have Carrie Fisher in real life anymore, so we kind of really, there's only so much we can do with this, you know? So that to me was the most egregious there. But kind of in order to like, I feel like to get back to the point of Book of Boba Fett and kind of why this finale didn't work, I wrote a piece on guyatthemovies.com. humble, what's it
Go
called?
ahead and check it out.
Right yeah, definitely. So I reviewed this for Guy at the Movies, and I started off with something like this, which is basically where, what's it called? It's time has come for us as loyal audience members and fanboys to say goodbye to another precious piece of content, because that's all this stuff really is anymore. The things that were once so coveted that really helped change cinema as far as what was capable of, what storytelling was capable of achieving, has now just become more disposable content, because we end this show not really on a satisfying note that leaves us as audience members really rich or fulfilled or coming away like, with some great grandiose life lesson, but just over the relief, the fact that, something actually happened in this episode and sort of was just there to tide us over until the next piece of disposable content, in this case, Marvel, with Moon Knight, comes out in roughly a month. And I feel like, I don't know, like, I feel like there's just something that goes down when I'm watching this episode, and I know it's going to be the action-packed episode, because I know that this is what Star Wars has trained me to do, and I see other people going online and being like, oh, it wasn't that bad. Oh, they were just repeating all the Western mantras. And I'm like, yeah, but all those other things had characters and stuff that I cared about, Like, part of the reason I've talked about this, this was almost like beat for beat, almost exactly like what they did in the first season finale of The Mandalorian, going all the way back to 2019. And the biggest difference to me between those two episodes is the fact that Mandalorian season 1 had characters that I had actually, spent time with, that actually, like, had learned to care about, and the fact that they killed off the Nick Nolte Ugnaught character the episode before. And that was, like, actually really heartbreaking, because you'd actually, like, learn to, endear yourself to that character. And then you saw the Taika Waititi droid come in and, like, throw down and kill, like, 1.5 million stormtroopers at once.
Right.
And it was fucking awesome, because it's like, yeah, you cared about that droid. That droid was funny, And all these characters, I'm like, aside from Chrysanthemum, which, again, that's another Legends character. And if you're not familiar with the Legends, like, I'm like, what does that mean? It's like, okay, it's a cool, badass Wookiee with armor. Cool. But I'm watching it, and it's like, okay, they're pinned down. Okay, I've seen that. Okay, they're taking out these guys. Okay, oh, they all double cross them. Okay, you have Fennec Shand having to explain things not once to us but twice as audience members, and I'm like, oh wow, so we're back with that again. Okay, and then
Boba Fett, like, none of this, like, Star Wars does not have to reinvent the wheel. It just doesn't. But the perfect example is what you just brought up, Mandalorian. They gave us great characters in that show, and in here it felt like characters were popping up, like Christensen. And he was dope, and it was like, whoa, look at him. But you never really got to know the character. You really never got to see the character in the limelight.
Literally, the only reason why I would have known why he hates, those aliens that he was beating up in the bar was as far as, like, because they originally, like, took Wookiees as slaves. The only reason why I knew that, it was because Chris told me that. Like, I never would have known that just by watching this.
And they never, like, something like rich as that, they never bring that up in this show.
Right.
Because they're too busy going with the old man in a diaper going in a tank, or they're too busy with a better character, right? With Mandalorian or Luke Skywalker. So this show is confusing. It really is confusing. But
and, like, I think it comes down to, like, again, just the direction that the creators chose to show, which is that Filoni was largely not involved with the creation of this show. And, like, I'm not trying to sound like a broken record here, but it's like, there's a reason why we love last week's episode, and why it just felt so much more emotionally rendering, so much more impactful, so much more, like, awesome, really, than any of the previous episodes. And it really sucked, because if anything, that episode last week was so good that this episode kind of ruined that episode in hindsight. Because I'm like, wow, you're taking all those awesome moments, bringing back Mando, bringing back the Beskar Blade, bringing back the child,
Right.
We got way too much Amy Sedaris in this episode, and now they even gave her, like, another sidekick in order to, like, trade terribly unfunny one-liners with, It's like, and now it's getting to the point where it's like, wow, they can't even give her, like, any good one-liners. It's just her voice is just so unbelievably obnoxious and ingratiating. I'm like, they couldn't blast her off the screen. Instead, they had to keep her around because she's contractually obligated to the show now.
Yeah, she felt like a little bit of a prequel character, if a bad one. So
I feel like that's disgraceful to those prequel characters, because there are even some of those prequel characters that I still enjoy. But I see what you mean. But yeah, and I'm like, and Boba Fett rides in on the Rancor, and, like, it's cool in the moment.
Cool.
But if nothing else, I'm like, oh yeah, that just reminds me. Oh, that's the only reason why we had the scene in episode 3 with the Rancor, which contributed nothing to that episode, but it's only there to set up for future on down the line. And it makes me wonder. Obviously, just bigger than obviously, if it's not Filoni, I don't care about it related to Star Wars now, just because Filoni just proved himself to be such a vital, quintessential part of Star Wars going forward. It just makes me wonder. It's like, this is the dude that consistently has turned out the best Star Wars content that we've had for damn near 20 years now. Since like 2005, when him and Lucas first started working on Clone Wars, the original iteration of Clone Wars to begin with. So it's like, what is it with Disney? And they're, like, unwilling to trust him and just go with Favreau over and over again. Where, don't get me wrong, I love Favreau. I love what he's done, like, just his contribution to the nerd world. But it's like, it just feels like everything, like Favreau's trusting, like, Robert Rodriguez, two of all people, which it's like, Jesus, we're gonna get to that in a little bit. But Well, what is it? What is it with their hesitation? Because again, we watched 16 episodes of Bad Batch week to week in a row last year. It was the best Star Wars thing that I got. I mean, it was really the only Star Wars thing that I got, but it was it was like the best Star Wars content that we have gotten in like a while, you know?
Yeah. No, those two work together well. It just in this show, I don't want Rob Rodriguez touching anything Star Wars anymore. It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
I guess we could get into Rob Rodriguez.
Yeah. Real quick, how many of his movies have you seen off the top of your head?
Machete. Alita Battle
not
Angel.
gonna lie, I was not expecting that. I was expecting at least either Spy Kids or Shark Boy and Lava Girl to be one of the first things out of your mouth. So that's fucking hilarious.
Spy Kids, Shark Boy.
Yeah, I mean, come on, again, come on, man. I was a child in the 2000s. I watched those movies. There's no shame in it. But no, I watched Spy Kids. I watched Shark Boy and Lava Girl. His 90s movies are where it's at, though. Like I'm telling you, if you get a chance, do yourself a favor, check out El Mariachi, which is like his first ever film. He made that film off like a $9,000 budget. That film's actually pretty good. Desperado. From Dusk Till Dawn. If you haven't seen From Dusk Till Dawn, do yourself a favor and watch that. That shit's great. And The Faculty. Those 4 movies, I'm telling you, like, because Robert Rodriguez is a guy who, for the last 20 years, I've been consistently asking him, like, what has this guy done to consistently earn himself all of these chances in Hollywood? I'm like, I know he's friends with Tarantino, but I'm like, obviously, you know, it's kind of cool that he, like, I feel like the coolest thing about the Spy Kids and movies and Shark Boy and Lava Girl is the fact that those are, like effectively, like, independently financed, like, gigantic kids movies, which, I mean, obviously, the CG still doesn't look great, but the fact that he, like, shot all those movies in, like, his garage, I don't know, there's something kind of commendable about that, you know, when it's like those so could have easily been, like, more generic, like, studio film fare, but it's just a thing of where it's like his entire 2000s run, and then his even more what the fuck 2000s run, where it seemed like for a minute, like between Grindhouse and then the Machete movies, that he was getting back to like his original 90s roots, but for like more of like a self-parody edge. Yeah. And then he's doing Alita Battle Angel. Like I don't understand him as a director when he had such a great start. The reason why, in hindsight now, I'm looking back as to why he still got such this really long-running career in Hollywood 30 years later, is that he effectively was one of the guys that we talk about when we talk about all, you know, the late 90s indie renaissance, who effectively, like, along with Tarantino and the Coen brothers and Danny Boyle and with Trainspotting and all those other guys that popped up in like the mid to late 90s period that effectively like helped to make the 90s independent movie what it was. He was a big contributor to that, and his movies were really good, mostly because, again, he effectively learned how to do low-budget filmmaking with action from a very early standpoint. And unlike a lot of other people who did that, he did it pretty fucking well. He knows how to direct action. But I think the biggest difference between someone like Favreau and someone like, say, like Taika Waititi when he directs something, or even surprisingly enough, and I never thought I would hear myself say it, is Bryce Dallas Howard with what she's done with her couple episodes that she's done. None of his action that he directs really, to me, has any emotional stakes or consequences, you know?
No.
It really doesn't, which, if anything, makes that season that he directed, that episode that he directed for Mando season 2, even more of a fluke in hindsight, because that episode I remember being fucking great. Like, the action in that movie, in that episode was great, you know? Like, when Boba came on the scene, he was smashing apart the stormtroopers. That was even before, you know, he got his armor back, and then by that point, it was over, you know?
Where was that in this show?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
None of it felt like the same guy who was doing that episode. I just feel like, I brought up last time I was here, he just want to make sure Boba coming in first time on the big or the small screen gets done justice, and stuff like this is like, it doesn't feel like the same love.
Right.
It definitely does not feel the same love. He finally uses his freaking jetpack in this episode.
Yeah, right.
And it's like, okay, you know, and none of it, like, as stuff were just random. The color palette's nasty. Like, this is the most uncinematic Disney Plus series in my opinion. I think the Bryce Dallas Howard movie proves it. Or movie. That one actually did look like a movie. Everything else did not look like a movie, but that episode looked like a movie.
Yeah, that third episode when she went with all the other Mandalorian with Bo-Katan, again, I still remember that being like, because that was after the Spider episode when Chris and I were like, oh no, are we in trouble here? And then they followed up with the Bryce House. I'm like, all right, we're in good hands now.
And in this season with her episode, it looked like a movie.
That was the best episode. Did she do episode 5 or 6?
5.
5, okay. So Filoni did episode 6 then. Okay, got it. Oh man, that's tough. Okay, here's what I'll say. Episode 6 was still my favorite episode, but episode 5, I'll say, probably looked the best. Like, that episode, the look of like that, like Halo looking like Sky City that he was on, that shit looked like amazing.
Yeah, it looked beautiful. But yeah, man, I don't want him touching Star Wars. I think that's it.
Yeah.
But he's not gonna touch Star Wars. He's done this. People are saying, I'm guessing it's getting good reviews, solid reviews, maybe. I'm not sure where that's at. The
It's kind of
viewership
mixed.
is there.
It's kind of 50-50.
Kind of
Some
mixed.
people are really liking it. Some people are not liking it. I don't know what it is. It's like every time we get a finale, we usually get this big turnaround because people were like, oh, now I see where it was all leading to and all that. And I'm sorry, man, but it's like, that's not an excuse anymore. It's not. It really isn't. It's like, dude, it's what we talked about last week. Learn your content curation. If you're going to put it out week to week and continue to pursue this model, you better damn well have something interesting and engaging to actually engage your audience, talk about this each week. That's more than just the brand loyalty. There's got to be more to it than that. There has to be, and like, go.
The last 2 episodes were the worthy, let's talk each week about it.
Exactly.
Everything else, not really.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I'm hoping that that's not the case for Obi-Wan, but I don't know because that's already gone through a bunch of reshoots. And man, I don't know. It's like, because we talk about like week to week viewing and what that actually means as far as like the further purposes of the story. But like, I don't know, like, well, what's your take on the whole like week to week? Because I talked a lot with Chris about this last week, and I really want your take. Like, what's your take on the whole week to week versus throwing it all out at once? Because it seems to me now that every other streaming service now, aside from Netflix, is pursuing the week to week model because it just bodes better for them with the Twitter and the online engagement and kind of, the discourse that goes on and like the discussion about it. And obviously that works well from a marketing standpoint. But the problem is it doesn't benefit every show, but it's even forced Netflix to a certain point to kind of backtrack on their original model and start like, pursuing different forms of release strategies, Yeah. So I don't know. What's your take on that?
I do enjoy it. I do like it when they do the 3 episodes just to begin with. Like Peacemaker, like the boys have done. Show up the 3 episodes, show up, and give enough there. Just to be intrigued. I like it, but I feel like if we're putting so much when we do these shows, we turn on the camera and we're putting so much energy, like poor Chris making that intro for something like this.
Right.
It makes it seem like it drains you.
Right, exactly. And like the worst part is that it's not like this is like the consistent norm. It only ever seems to happen with the Disney Plus shows. I'm not talking about this way with the Apple shows. I'm not talking about this way with definitely not with the HBO shows, because again, those were made. Those started the whole week-to-week discourse thing, and then Lost kind of picked that up and ran with it. Again, you go all the way back in the day. You talk about The Sopranos. The Sopranos started like the week-to-week like must-watch TV viewing to the point where every other network tried pursuing that. So you don't see this with Apple. You don't see this problem with Amazon. You don't see this problem with Hulu. When people actually bother to talk about a Hulu show. It's like I guess the reason why I'm so harsh on the Disney Plus shows is because you don't see that problem with all the Disney Plus shows, where even though the Disney Plus shows are the most talked about thing because of obviously the brand, the strength of the brand, that's really all it is. Because the rest of these shows, outside of the streamers that they're on, they really don't have a big brand to really attach them to. HBO is largely original content. Apple is largely original content. Amazon, when it is brand recognition, it's usually some off-kilter, off-the-beaten-path type of brand that really only like niche people who read it like 20 years ago would know about. It's like so I guess that's the biggest difference is that that Disney Plus is kind of all hype and no juice, and that's the biggest problem that I have with their stuff so far.
I feel like Mandalorian season 2 was the best week to week.
Easily.
I could do it each week. I could talk about it, but something like a WandaVision, a Falcon Winter Soldier, a Loki.
And Loki was even something that in hindsight, Chris and I did kind of come around on, and we're like sort of kind of trying to recap week to week. But even then, like that really didn't pick up for me until like the second half of the show where I'm like, okay, now I'm locked in. Now I want to see what's happening, But even Hawkeye, it's like as much fun as Hawkeye was on a week to week basis, after a certain point, I'm like, oh yeah, I do have another episode of Hawkeye. And then after a certain point, I'm like, can we just get this like all at once, please?
So perfect example is I'm not doing nothing with Peacemaker, and tomorrow's the new episode, and I'm not. It just goes, last week I watched it like on a Friday. And that's kind of uncharacteristic. Usually I like to watch these on the day premieres or maybe like the night.
See, Peacemaker's the only one that I'll disagree with you on because I watch those episodes week to week like religiously now. And it almost feels like there's too long of a time period. And every time I'm like, they can't get better with each episode. And then I do it. I'm like, God damn it. How the fuck did they top themselves? They had a dude chainsawing an alien controlled gorilla. And I'm like, exactly. I'm like, this is why. I'm like, see, this is what I'm talking about when I talk about week to week shit,
But that brand right there with Peacemaker is not nowhere near as here in Star Wars where Everyone's
course.
talking. You're scared of the spoilers. Last week I got spoiled about Cad Bane. But Peacemaker's like, I can comfortably watch it and not get spoiled, and I like it. And it's actually good stuff. It's
Yeah.
miles better than stuff we're getting here.
Way better, like way fucking better, you know. And the fact that this is like James Gunn's first TV show and he handles it like such a goddamn pro. I mean, again, like we talk about it, like James Gunn has effectively proved himself as kind of the master of that type of thing. But there's really one other thing that I, you know, we're almost done. Like I said, this episode is not going to be too long. You know, there's only so much that we can actually talk about as we see.
Yeah.
You know, again, the action, it was generic. Like I said, it hits all the beats. What did you think of like how they did Cad Bane? Because I've got a really weird take on that whole thing, and like it's really interesting because my brothers brought up a good point when I was talking to them about it, and they're like, "Yeah, obviously he had to kill Cad Bane because he was using his like skills that he learned." Because the whole emphasis on Cad Bane was apparently to again show like what Boba previously was versus what he'd become and how he uses his training with the Tusker Raiders in order to take him down. I'm like, okay, that would have been cool and all if they'd actually emphasized that from minute one, but they didn't, you know, or at least they didn't do a good job of emphasizing it, you know?
Right. No, with Cad Bane, it was awesome to see him clearly, but it did feel like, I'll be honest with you now, and I knew something was off last week. It was fan service. That was the definition of fan service that didn't lead up to nothing. I wanted to know,
I agree.
What is
and
this,
it's so funny
guy been doing?
Yeah, Chris and I were debating this so heavily last week, what the definition of fan service was, and really how it was just bad storytelling. And this falls into the category of fan service because what did Cad Bane ultimately contribute? What did he contribute?
Nothing. There's been recent examples of fan service. Has been, you could do fan service and it can fill in the movie and it can work within the movie, and that just makes it even better. But something with Cad Bane,
but when that happens, I don't call that fan service. Like when it's done well in a movie and it serves the story, that is not fan service.
On the public eye, it's fan service, but once you really digest it,
once you actually break it down, like what fan service actually is, because in my mind, fan service was always associated with something that was just thrown in there in order to get the audience's attention and reference something else without actually contributing anything to the story, which for the most part, with these Star Wars shows, live action shows, I really haven't found to be the case. I found that everything that they threw in there, like they did contribute to the story. You know, it's one of the reasons why when people were saying, "Oh, all the Clone Wars cameos that are popping up in Clone Wars and Mandalorian," and I'm like, "Do we need them?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, because they're guiding him."
Yeah,
I'm like, "You kind of do that. They're guiding him on the next stage of his journey towards this." You know, if the goal was always to bring him into the greater fold, then you kind of need these legacy characters. You know, I do not agree at all.
I respect the disagreements I have had or seen the people's opinions, but I never understand the whole Luke Skywalker thing that you bring him in now, it makes the galaxy feel smaller. And that
I never understood that.
In that context, Grogu is a Force user. What else Jedi is out there that knows about this? Who can That's Luke. So
and we'd already met Ahsoka by that point, who'd already made her stance on the Jedi clear. So it's like obviously, logistically speaking, like
Luke,
unless
Cal,
like, if anything, it would have made to me it would have been much more so fan service if they just brought in some other random Jedi that survived Order 66 that like only a few fans would know, you know?
Yeah. But with Cad Bane, he didn't add nothing. I want to know what this guy was been doing. The Seth Green robot, he wasn't there. I was just kind of confused. And him getting killed.
I love that you know that Seth Green, the voice is the robot. That's great.
Yeah. With him, I love that Boba kills him, but it's like
But like after it's like, but of course he gets shot in the ass like a bitch so many times. I'm like, okay, I know where this is going. I'm like, it's gonna. And you know what's so funny too is during that final fight, I'm like, okay, this is gonna be the ultimate proving that Boba can't do anything by himself. He's gonna need Fennec Shand to do everything for him because Fennec's gonna or Mando or somebody is gonna come out of nowhere and take down Cad Bane in the back. And so if anything, it was almost like a shock when he actually like did the first actual thing on his own that he's done in this entire goddamn show and actually like take out Cad Bane, you know? But like the fact that it's like, okay, so you're gonna have Cad Bane in there is like in this attempt to like show like, okay, this is what Boba was previously. He was this ruthless killer. He didn't really care about anything, and now he's like, you know, kind of more so this benevolent leader. But again, it's the ultimate problem with these types of things where it's like you have to show them actually trying. And it's like, what did we see Boba actually do as a leader? Every decision that he made.
He was bad in this episode. He was his game plans were so bad. Like I was like, why is this guy in charge?
What is this? Amateur fantasy football here? Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, this guy was definitely an amateur. I think maybe it was calculated. Maybe they want to get Mando to come in here, a Disney original character, and shit on the old school guy and be like, hey, this is our guy. it might be calculated. Now we're going into theories now because
Yeah, now we're getting into theories
we
because
gotta explain this.
yeah, and look, I'm not
show.
going to pretend that like Cad Bane was a super rich and interesting character. I guess the whole thing that I always admired about him is the fact that like he's one of those characters that I love when they have these types of characters where they're not particularly deep or rich or interesting, but they come in, you know exactly what they're going to do. They do exactly what they say they're going to do. They're fucking good at it. They're effective. They kick ass. They take names. And the fact that he's like one of only like a bounty hunter. The fact that he's a bounty hunter that could actually like go up against a Jedi and there's more than a 50% chance that he actually like, comes out on top. Like that was impressive, you know? So like obviously you have this rich lore that's actually been built and established with Cad Bane, as opposed to Boba, who again was a glorified toy that Lucas really never put any thought or effort into, that the prequels kind of sort of did something with, but not really. And then by the time we're actually reintroducing him as an adult, it's like, it's the crucial difference of telling versus showing. We know Cad Bane. We've spent time with this character. We've seen him be a badass versus what have we seen Boba do? He fell into a Sarlacc pit.
Nothing. Yeah.
Like his first assignment, he got rescued. He drank some strange cactus juice, went into the desert, tried to get his armor back, almost got eaten by the same thing that almost ate him the first time. You know, do some cool things in Mandalorian and then come back and be a really shitty leader in Tatooine.
I'm fine with Cad Bane, dying. Maybe they didn't like this show.
But I guess the point that I'm trying to get at is that it wasn't earned. Like that choice. I understand the intent of what they're trying to get at, but it wasn't earned.
It wasn't
earned. And that's what we talk about when we're talking about good versus bad storytelling. Good storytelling, the character dictates the story. Bad storytelling, the story dictates the character. And that's exactly what we had here, to me, at the very least.
Yeah. No, definitely. Oh man, what was that? Boba, yeah. So I mean, with Cad Bane dying, like we've seen his moments in Clone Wars. We got those moments.
Right.
We have those. I'm okay with it. I know some people are probably mad at it. So
you think so?
I think people are mad about the decision of killing Cad Bane.
I mean, I understand. I absolutely understand why as far as that decision. Yeah. But if it's a matter of they felt like they didn't get to spend enough time with him in live action because they're like, oh, it's only live action. To all those people, you know what I'm going to say? I'm going to be like, yo, go watch the animated.
Go watch the anime. Yeah,
it's better than all this shit.
It is.
All this shit. Like I know people love that live action. I'm telling you, the animated stuff, that's the best Star Wars to me. I've been saying that for 2 years now, and I stand by that statement. And the animated stuff is the best Star Wars to me, easily. You know,
right?
That because that's what proved that Star Wars. All those people that were saying all the time, "Oh, Star Wars will never work on TV. Star Wars will never work on TV." I'm like, watch the animated stuff. That proves that Star Wars was at least that type of Star Wars was made for TV. You know, it's like we got 2 different iterations of the Joseph Campbell's origin story, the Jesus story, whatever you want to call it, with the Star Wars movies. It worked. They tried again with the movies. It didn't work. You know, because again, they were trying to have it both ways. They were trying to have their cake and eat it too. It didn't work. And now it's on TV. And that's where Star Wars is here to stay. There's a reason why they pretty much scrapped both Star Wars projects. Like Patty Jenkins' Rogue Squadron is not happening anymore. Rian Johnson's Star Wars trilogy is no longer happening. And as for the status of the Taika Waititi Star Wars movie, well, they just gotta find time for him because he's currently working on 15 different projects all at the same time right now. And who the hell knows when we're gonna get stuff from that. But that's pretty much it. That's our recap series of Book of Boba Fett. I wish I could say it was more eventful, but yeah, like I said, you're just going to get honesty from us here on out, you know, and especially since this is kind of the last one of these that we're really going to do in live action format. So be sure to stay tuned for more of our just quick short reactions. You know, we got our Harry Potter first time watch series kicking off this weekend. So make sure you guys tune in for that. That's going to be a lot of fun. I've been having an absolute blast showing Chris those movies. I still can't believe that he's never seen those movies beforehand. Matt, thanks for coming on and co-hosting this with me, dude. Where can the good people find you?
Or you guys can find me right there, Basic Entertainment, getting back into the groove of YouTube stuff. But if you guys want to keep up with me on almost like a daily basis, go on TikTok, Basic Entertain. Fuck YouTube. It's all about TikTok right now, personally for me. But no, YouTube stuff, I'm coming out with some reviews and some reactions and some rankings once that pops up. Once we can get away from this dreaded month of February and January and Moon Falls and the just a bunch of nasty movies.
Oh, well, you're not a Roland Emmerich fan. You don't want to watch a movie about the moon secretly being an artificial intelligence that's gonna come and eat us all?
No, I don't care. It's so bad out right now. It's so dry. But hopefully this Sunday,
it's dry right now.
In March, we're gonna get back up and we're gonna start making some content on the channel. But of course, subscribe here to the channel, Basic Entertainment. And thanks, Dom, for inviting me. And what does Chris do? Oh, tell where the good people can find you, Dom.
Add Movie Nerd Reviews, Facebook, Instagram, Letterboxd, Serialize. Hey, man, you tried. You gave it your best shot. Twitter. Follow Chris, everything he does, at Christian Ivanko across all platforms. And be sure to once again click the subscribe button, click the like button, click the bell next to it. That way you guys get notified every time we put out new content. Like I said, Harry Potter First Time Watch kicks off this week, so be sure you don't want to miss that. New episodes of Talkin' Thrones are also still going up on the audio channels. Be sure to keep following us on Spotify and Anchor and Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts every week. And as always, people, for myself and Matt, 12 seasons of a short film. Watch more fucking movies.
More fucking movies.
There we go. See you guys later.